So if you're married or if you're in a relationship, this is something you need to think about before you make a move to Merida. Just in the last 3 months, married couples, particularly, I think one of the five was was not married, but they were together, been together for a long time. Five families have split up and left. One stayed behind, the other went back to the States. Five just in the last 3 months. I've noticed that trend over the years, but the five recent was all together, back to back to back to back. And maybe it had to do with possibly being summertime, so that heat was a little extra. So one of the things you need to discuss is what happens if you don't like it. What if one of you like it and the other don't? What's the plan? Because a couple of these folks, they had bought homes while they were here, and one left and the other stayed. And that was over five couples. So I think it's worth a discussion to have because one particular couple, they thought that when they went back, the other would come back with them. And he was like, hell no. I ain't going back to the States. And so he stayed. And in fact, it was that way with all five couples. One stayed, the husband stayed, and there was two where the wife stayed. And so three where the husbands left, two where the wife stayed. So it's real. Why did they leave? Some just had a difficult time adjusting to the culture. And I've mentioned this before. It's not easy. It is not easy at all. It takes a lot of work and takes a lot of patience. And some people they just don't want to put in the work. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. You have to know who you are and what you're willing to do and what you want to do. You know what I mean? There's no shade, no slight. You got to be truthful to yourself. And if you come up to the conclusion that this is not for me, it takes courage to say, this ain't working for me. I'd rather be back at home at the comfort of my country and do the things that you have to know yourself. At least they tried or made an effort. You know what I mean? You could try and just say, hey, I tried, I gave it a shot. And that's the most important thing. You know what I mean? And because I ain't gonna lie, this life in terms of living in another country, learning another language, another culture, and not being able to speak the language is just an extra layer that just makes everything difficult even more already. I think if the language barrier wasn't such an issue, it could make life a little bit easier. And I hear people, well, you just gotta learn Spanish. Well, when you get to a certain age, it's difficult and it takes time and it takes work. And again, I'm not downplaying and saying a person shouldn't, learn Spanish, because I always say it definitely will help the experience and you'll have a much more better experience if you can. But when you first get here and you're trying to learn and you're trying to adapt and adjust to the culture and the way they do things here, it can be overwhelming. So to have that conversation on what it looks like when you decide it ain't gonna work. Do both of you go back? Do one of you stay? And if one stays and the other leave, what's the contingency? What's the backup plan? How are we gonna work this out? Will you come visit? Will you come visit? You know, a couple of weeks every other month or two, or will I come back to the States and see you every other month or two? What's that game plan? All marriages are different. Just because you're married don't mean you have to live together 24/7. In fact, I've met a lot of people who and who live in separate houses and have their own place, and they're married, happier. Because and every now and again they'll go spend the night or spend 2-3 days at the spouse's house, the other spouse's house, and then the next week the other spouse will come to the other house, and and they love it. They say relationships, marriages thrive much better. I try to introduce that idea to Kim. She was like, baby, let's live in separate houses. And then, before we moved here, we were separated for a while. She had her own place, I had my own place, and we would go see each other. It'd be a few days. I'd be, enjoying my free time and silence and not having to hear nobody nag me about picking this up or clean that up or do this and that. And I'm sure she was happy not to hear my mouth, but I was grateful for my time. And then when I saw her, I was happy to see her. You know what I mean? But 2 days later, like, all right, it's time for you going back to your house. And, or I'll be over there. And after about a day or two, she'll be like, all right, yeah, you know what? Yeah, you going back to your house. I'll see you in a couple of days. You know what I mean? So you got to find what works for you. Marriage is not a one size fit all. You don't have to do what everybody else do. And like I said, you might find that you like each other even more. But had a conversation, talk it through, because it's happening more and more and more. This summer, man, it was hot, and dealing with the language, dealing with the culture and the way they do things, and then dealing with the heat on top of that, that's enough to send anybody packing. You know what I'm saying? So just as a video, an awareness video. There's one guy who had a very successful business, and he ain't want to come here, but his wife wanted to come, and so he was trying to support her, and he came because she had already made a decision. She was coming regardless. If he came or not, she was coming. You know what I'm saying? So he came out, and he didn't care for the place too much, but he traveled back and forth back to the States to do his business and just spend time with his family. Mother was much older, and he wanted to be around for that, for her. And so he'll come, and when he was here, he was involved 100%. And then after a week or 2 or 3, in some cases, he'd go back. And it might be gone for a couple of months, and then he'll come back. And in between that time, the spouse went back to the States to see him. Worked great for them. If I can get them on here to talk about it, I will. They might not want to. But you got to do you. You got to do what works for you. When I say you as a couple, work it out, make it work. And sometimes some folk might just need to be eased into this. You know what I mean? This like I say, this is not for everybody. I don't ever want to give you the illusion that this is simple. It is not. Even me, 5 years in, there have been some times where, not recently when we talked about leaving to go to another place, but there have been some times where I just kind of sat back, especially at the beginning. It was like, man, it's so frustrating dealing with some of these issues, and will I ever come to grips with it and just accept it? You know what I mean? Because you have to if you're gonna live in another place, another country that do things different. Their ways are not necessarily our ways. Our ways are not their ways. And so somebody has to adjust, and being that you're gonna be here in another country, you the one that's gonna have to adjust. I mentioned this before, Merida will break you. Merida is not changing. The culture is not changing. They fine. This is normal for them, just like our normal is our normal. You know what I mean? You really have to have a very strong why for why you're doing this. Visiting and living are two different things. You know, living abroad, and I say this all the time, living abroad is one thing. Staying abroad is a whole nother, it takes to require a whole nother skill set. Anybody can move here. You know, anybody can come stay and live and visit, but can you stay and make it work and build a life? Can you do that? And you have to be honest with yourself. I'm looking at this man's tree. I did not realize that was a papaya tree. Got a papayas just hanging off the tree on the other side of that wall. But you gotta find your place. And keep in mind, there are many other countries. I'd encourage you to visit multiple places before you settle in on a place, because some of you need to be in the place where English is spoken. English does not have to be the first language, but English is widely spoken in many other countries. So you might want to investigate some of those places where English is spoken. That will help. You know, a lot of people go to the Philippines, they speak a lot of English is widely spoken. A lot of people go to Vietnam, English is widely spoken. A lot of people go to the Caribbeans, English is spoken. But places like Colombia, depending on which part of Colombia, but Colombia in general, Mexico in general, you gonna have to speak some Spanish. And my Spanish, I can't even say I'm 30%, but I know enough to get around. It doesn't affect my quality of life. Now, my quality of life would be enhanced if I spoke the language, but I can get pretty much what I want and do what I need and comfortably navigate. Now, when I first got here, I wanted to eat. Cause I remember the first time I went to a restaurant, I couldn't order, then couldn't read the menu, and it was embarrassing. I was embarrassed. And it took about 2-3 months before I got over the embarrassment part and realized people really don't care and ain't paying me no attention. It's literally all in your head. But for the first 3 months, I'll walk into a restaurant, and if I saw people in there, I turn around and walk out. And the only places I ate at was where there was nobody in there, because I didn't want to be laughed at. You know what I mean? Or what I perceived to be in my mind laughed at. And so I went into many places that I didn't necessarily eat that type of food, but I went in there because there was nobody in there. And the food turned out to be pretty good. That's how I started discovering all these mom and pop shops, because, you know, the time of day that I would go, really ain't nobody in there, because they eat late. They eat late here. You know, like lunch generally start around 1 o'clock. You know, you go to a restaurant thinking you can get some lunch at 11, they ain't even open. Or they just opening up and take another hour to get ready. You know, but have that conversation with your significant other, work it out, discuss it, and have a contingency plan in place, because for many of you, you more than likely will need to lean on that contingency plan because somebody going home. That's just it. See, people, I'm gonna share with you the real deal talk. I try and bring topics that you don't really hear about from others. And I don't think that nobody's hiding anything or trying to prevent. I just don't think people realize. It's just not something you just think about. It's not a topic you just think about to talk about. You know what I mean? But I try and be conscious of the little details that can make or break a person's stay here in Merida. Because Kim, he was talking about, man, I'm leaving. I ain't staying here. Doing all that talking when she first got here, And I was like, hey, I ain't going nowhere. You do you. I'm not here to hold you hostage, keep you trapped in a place that you don't. I don't ever want you to think you stuck and trapped. And that's just always been my mindset, So you got to do what works for you. Don't be worried about other people's opinions. You don't owe nobody no explanation. You don't owe nobody. Who cares about their judgment? There are a lot of people who make judgments and make statements on my channel. They think they helping, and many comments are helpful, but a lot of the shade and the judgments and the down talk, it rolls right off of my back. I have thick skin. I can care less what they think. You know what I mean? Because I understand while they talking trash about me, they got their own problems. They may not have financial problems, some of the same financial problems I have. They might not have the same, but they got other problems that they can't figure out and contend with. So, and we all, and I recognize that. So that's why I don't bother folks or judge folks, because we all dealing with something. It's different, but we're all dealing with something, and it's difficult for the individual. Mine just happened to be this and that, and that's something that they might have mastered. And kudos to them. But there's some things in their life that they haven't mastered. And once you realize that people generally have their own problems and are barely just getting through the day, you know what I mean? And instead of them worried about you, they should be worried about their own stuff, So get your priorities in order as it relates to you, and not worry about other people. You will have a less stressful life in the end. So if you have questions, you like to talk, like to chat, book a consultation. The link's on the website for consultation, moveabroadandthrive.com. Join our VIP community as well. You can learn more information about that on the website. And I'm revamping the site. I'm revamping our services. I'm revamping everything to be more info-centered. And it's going to all be posted on the website. Resources are all inside the VIP. So I'm going through some changes with that, updating a lot of things now. And I hope you found this video useful. Please share, like, comment, give a thumbs up. And I'm about to do some swimming.